Okay, I think it's connected to Facebook now, so I can get it to go Facebook Live. Nope. What happened to it? Clicked off. Can you see it, Pastor Ross, on Facebook? Can
Yep.
can you see it? Can you see it on Facebook? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. There go Pastor Clark. Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right, man.
I had to record my service and I just got done. I was trying to move it up earlier.
No problem. So we got everybody in.
Pastor, how are you, sir?
Man, I'm doing awesome. How about yourself?
Hey, you know it more than me. You down there. Major things.
Man, it sounds good. It sounds good. Especially when it's coming out your mouth, it sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to pray, and I sent out some questions that we kind of use for a guide. And I really believe this is God ordained for us to come together and to really just see the church from a different lens. And so I am excited about this experience that God is going to give all of us. I know I've been banging my head, racking my head like, God, what can we do? We got to get it out here so churches can start transitioning, because it's no more normal anymore. That norm that we knew February, March 1st is gone. So now we have to go in a different lane. So let's pray, and then we'll just jump right into our conversation. Father, we thank you tonight for this opportunity that we can come together to share together, God. We pray, oh God, that you would give us understanding of your word. But most of all, Father, I pray that you would lead and guide our tongues and our mind. I pray, oh God, that something will be said and done on this platform, God, that would engage the minds of the hearers, but God, that would allow them to change their thinking and the atmosphere for creativity and innovation. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So we're going to get started. I tell you, I'm a transparent person. So I can sometimes tell on myself better than anybody else can. And so as I began to really pray and ask God, what can I do? What can I kind of bring to the table that can help churches? Because I went to mega churches. I've been a part of a mega church. I've been a part of mid-sized church. I'm now with a smaller church that God led me to help there. So I've been in all kind of atmospheres. I've seen everything done in a different way. And so as I began to pray, I said, God, show us what to do. And I said, God, lead me to some men and women that I believe that can come to the table, that we can talk. I reached out to Pastor Carrie. She had something else, but she said, Erika, please include me on another one. I said, Pastor Carrie, I will. And she said, I try to get out of it. I said, it's okay. We'll have more to come. So I believe tonight is just going to be one of those things that I think is the start of many things to come. I know we are notorious sometimes to start something and never keep it up. But I believe tonight God's going to allow this relationship here and other platforms to help us to continue to move forward with the church experience. So we want to start with an introduction of who we are. Just let the people know who we are. Pastor Ross, I'm going to start with you. If you give them a little introduction of who you are, and then we'll just go from there.
Yes, ma'am. Number one, Doc, I'm excited to be on here with you.
Thank you.
Honored to share this platform and grateful for the invite. I am Kervance Ross, go by the Kingmaker, and I'm the pastor of Internet and Innovation at the greatest church on the planet, New Birth Missionary Baptist Church, where our senior pastor is Dr. Jamal Harrison Bryant. And I operate in the marketplace, ministry, and the mainstream. It is my purpose and call in life to touch at least 1 billion people before I die and help them obtain their optimum level of purpose, greatness, and success. Wow. Currently finishing up my PhD studies in leadership and organizational change. I am the owner of KDR Consulting, which is a marketing and strategic development firm. who focuses in on happens to be the seven kingdoms. I didn't realize that until I got into ministry, that we focus on major corporations, small business, government, faith-based, nonprofit, entertainment, and education. Also published author, minister of the gospel, husband, and a lover of people, and currently what I call a faith-based futurist, where I'm able to look into the future and use that lens to create innovation, strategies, and implementation for people in all works and walks of life by simply focusing in on purpose as the core. And once you identify the purpose, creating the platform is a piece of cake.
Oh, wow. I like that. I like that. Pastor Clark.
Well, you want me to go after that, huh?
Come in.
So I am Pastor Deon Clark. I am the senior pastor of Equation Church in Greensboro, North Carolina. I have served in ministry, in mega ministry at Mount Zion Baptist Church as the youth pastor over the years before being here and planning Equation Church. I am a part of the Full Gospel Baptist Fellowship, where I serve in leadership there. I have my Master's of Divinity from Shaw University and Bachelor's in Business Management from the North Carolina A&T State University.
Aggie Pride.
Aggie Pride, yes. And I also am a husband, three wonderful children. I also am an author, and I also own a company just like Pastor Ross here that's called Clark Creative Solutions, where we do marketing, social media management, and church leadership and business management and those things like that to help aid ministry and move them forward and help them not to remain stuck. So I'm honored to be here, and thank you, Dr. Hendrix, for having me. And I'll just stop right there because he's already said it all. So we kind of share some of the same.
All right. Well, as you all know, my name is Dr. Erika Hendrix. I have been in ministry, preaching ministry for 25 years. It didn't seem like it's been that long. I got my undergrad at North Carolina A&T State University in political science. I got my master's from Hood Theological Seminary. And Pastor Ross, I was down your way for my D-Min at ITC in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
So I finished up down there in 2011. Yeah, 2011. So I was down there for about 3.5 years. And that was a great experience. I too am an author. We have been considered essential workers. Myself, my mom, and my sister, we own group homes and a mental health agency. And so my day is never dull. It's one of those adventurous days, but I am grateful. I'm a professor of theology, adjunct professor of theology at Hosanna Bible College here in Greensboro. The main location is in Durham. And so I'm just excited for this platform. I am one to I love to create. I love to think outside of the box. I don't like to be in a box. If you put me in a box, I'm gonna find a way to get out of it. So I want to be able to create a space of time that I can allow myself to be creative. And when you tell me no, I'm motivated by the word no, because no to me means yes. When you tell me no, I'm gonna find a way to get around it. And so I am honored to be here with you two gentlemen tonight. And so I believe this is God ordained. And just a sidebar, I kept saying, well, Pastor Ross is so busy. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to catch him. I said, but I'm gonna try. I said, Lord, I'm gonna try because he dropped it in my spirit. I'm gonna try. And when I tell you he reached out, I was like, wow, he reached out to me. And so I was grateful that, sometimes you gotta go through 10 people, just to get a response. And I mean, he reached back out to me. Pastor Clark, I called his assistant and she said, let me get back with you. She got back with me within 5 minutes. I said, great. I said, okay, God. Well, one more. So Pastor Kerry said, Eric, I'm trying everything I can. I said, listen, Pastor Kerry, we'll come back again and we'll do this again. But I am grateful to God for this opportunity. I had something planned, and right during COVID, I had something with Reverend Breonna Parker and Pastor Akeem Walker. We were set to do a conference in March, and COVID hit. And so we had to cancel that. And so I said, God, I need to do something. And so I was talking to my pastor. Let me back up. I'm sorry. I'm the executive pastor at Overcoming Deliverance Center. My bishop is Bishop Charlie Watson. My pastor is Pastor Bettina Moffitt. And so I've been given the charge there to create a space that we can grow and yet remain relevant. Sometimes I think people focus so much on the growth, and we don't focus on the relevancy of ministry. And if we all are honest tonight, when COVID hit and we were no longer able to go into our churches, at that moment, you became a global church. Whether you wanted to accept that or not, that's what happened. Whether people knew you or not, they knew you to be a global experience. So at that moment, you had to prepare yourself to shift how you do church, to shift how you engage. And I can be honest, and shortly thereafter, my pastor got sick, and she currently is going through COVID, and God is healing her body. And so I was thrust into doing Sunday morning Bible study, leadership. And she told me yesterday, she said, Erica, I don't want to tire you again. I said, I'm not tired. I said, my job tires me out, but the church, this part doesn't tire me out. And so I just want to really engage in conversation and get some conversation with you. Where do you see us going since this has started? Where do we see this going?
Pastor Ross, you can go first, sir.
One of the realities of a moment like this is my perspective that crisis cultivates clarity, which ultimately creates opportunities for people to cultivate others.
Wow.
And within this dynamic, one of the things that many of us have highlighted is what we lost, as opposed to focusing on what we've obtained.
Wow.
The reality is that society generally develops, and from a cultural standpoint, every 4 to 5 years.
Wow.
The sad part is church culture develops every 15 to 16 years. And sometimes it is my belief that the permissive will of God has put us in a place where he stopped us simply to allow us to catch up on what we've been behind on.
Wow.
Within this dynamic, it has forced many of us to look at who we are, to look at what we've become comfortable with, and then make adjustments so that we don't get left behind.
Wow.
I said it in a past circumstance, from a theological standpoint. Most of us only look at the terminology rapture, which is not in the Bible, but its counterparts are there to be caught up. We see it only from an eschatological point of view. We see it as what's going to happen in the future. But truthfully, there is an existential reality to rapture, which puts us in a position where God will often allow himself to get in a temporary state of reverse, to simply go back to where we have been parked and put us in a permanent state of drive and catch us up to where he's designed us to be. And this crisis has put many of us in the position to catch up to what we've been behind on. We've been focused on putting people in seats and hearkening the arch of the door, not embracing the fact that everything that Jesus ever did was outside of the doors and the auspices of church.
Right.
And it is forcing us to get back to the reality that where we're going to go to reach the uttermost parts of the world, it is going to be impossible for us to reach the uttermost when we're in the minormost. And this position is not a negative. It is really a catapulting opportunity for us to push ourselves into the Bible while we've been in the prehistoric ages. And now crisis has cultivated an opportunity for us to change. So I see us going into a place that forces us to be more ministry and service minded, as opposed to simply being comfortable and church focused.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Pastor Clark, jump on in.
Yeah, absolutely amazing, Pastor Ross. I agree with everything that he said, because when you look at where the church is, or where the church was to where the church is, and then where the church is going to need to be, we as the church, the people of the church, have been operating in what I call church emotional disorder. And what I mean by that is we've got caught in so many cycles that we forgot what it takes to do ministry regardless of what's around us. And so where the church is going to a place where many of us, and I say us, meaning us as the church, regardless of whether you're mega church, whether you're, medium size, regardless, every church has been pushed to be innovative and has been pushed to do things that they did not even want to do to survive.
That's right.
But it's things that they should have been doing before the pandemic hit. So could it be that during this time that God allowed this to happen so the church can be a better church to receive those who got lost from the church, to receive those who are coming back to the church? And we have to be properly prepared to make sure that when they come, we're ready to receive them, because where the church is and where the church was and where the church is going are three different stages of life. Because where we were just rehearsing. We just became emotionally ignorant because we repeated cycle after cycle. We would do the same thing over and over. And as Pastor Ross just said, I think that church operates in trends. We see one church do it, then we do it, right? Instead of asking God what works for us. What works for New Birth may not work for Equation. What works for Equation may not work for New Birth. It depends on where you are. And so we have to learn how to tap into what God wants us to do and be ready to take the next leap and be innovative on where the church needs to go, so we don't lose those who already got lost based on us operating out of the cycles we were in.
Wow. Well, and one of the things I began to really think about, we have been a dysfunctional, functioning church, meaning that we've had some handicaps that we've been able to cover up for so long. And we've had areas that we needed to focus on, but because we were so busy doing other things, some areas lack. And so I believe that this thing has really been orchestrated by God for us to really repurpose, refocus, and bring your church into more clarity on what is your true assignment. Because everybody does not have the same path. Every church does not have the same audience that we are to reach. But I believe that every church has the same kingdom assignment, and that is to disciple and then to bring us together as the body of Christ. We've been so segregated and separate for so long. Could it be that God has said, I'm calling my church back to a place that we can really hear the divine voice of God in this season, and we can begin to do discipleship, not by walking outside and putting tracts on people's doors or knocking on people's doors. We can reach more people at this venue than we can going outside. But now, even going outside of the doors, your discipleship needs to look different. I often tell people this: if I'm hungry, feed me first, and then I'll listen. If I have no shoes or clothes, clothe me first, and then I'll be more apt to walk with you. But what we've done, we've tried to make people conform to our way of doing church, when really our way of doing church at some point is not biblical. It's become denominational. It's become traditional. And so now we have to look at, what is my tradition? What has the tradition of I've coming out of caused my church to do? Have we failed the people because of tradition? Have we crippled our people to come to a building, and we've not looked outside the lens and said, God, that everything you've done was outside? One of my most favorite parables in the Bible was the woman at the well. Jesus could have very well brought her back to the temple, but he met her where she was. And where she was, he used something that she could relate to, and that was water. And then when he began to have the dialogue with her about the water, it drew her in to, he began to talk about the water, this water that I'm going to give you, you'll never thirst again. I think what we've done, we've left people with no hope beyond the church. When they leave your church, can they really say that I got fed? or am I still thirsty? I heard a mentor of mine say to me one time before. He said, Erika, when the people become, when they stop becoming hungry and thirsty, that's a problem.
Hmm.
Stop becoming hungry and thirsty, that's a problem in church. And so now I believe now we're looking now differently at what have we done or what we can do. My first book was an open letter to the Black church. And the church, the book was designed to have a fluid conversation. It was never designed to provide an answer. It was to start a conversation. So when I started on book 2, I was taking it from the same lens. Now I've had to start from scratch on book 2 because I was going from the point of being in the building. And now I'm using the model God has given me of reentry. When someone is released from prison, they are prepared to reenter into a society that they don't know anymore. So now we've got to prepare people to re-enter back to a building or back to a place of worship that looks different. It's the same building, but now we're coming back. You're coming back to people who've lost loved ones. You're coming back to people who have lost jobs. We're coming back to people who no longer can provide for their families. What are we going to do with that context, given the fact of this pandemic? I know I said a lot, but
Pastor Clark, I'm gonna let you go first. You were kind and let me go first last time.
I think that Dr. Hendrix, you said a mouthful right there, because I think the problem is we were stuck in tradition. Like, and I heard you say we have to go, like, what is that tradition? We got stuck in tradition. So tradition is what tainted us as the church, because we weren't willing to change based on our denomination. Our denominations started making us traditional. Our ways made us stay in the same place. And so this pandemic is causing the traditions to be eradicated. It's causing the traditions to move out of the way, because the reality is churches who stay in tradition, they ultimately die.
Yeah.
And now watch this. Churches have to now survive off substance, but not tradition. And if we're not careful to appropriate the right kind of substance with innovation and clarity and implementation, then we'll stay stuck in tradition. And watch this. After the pandemic is over, the church will be in a pandemic because we weren't ready to go where we needed to go.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's I picked up a quote a couple of years ago that said traditions are living principles carried on by dead people. Traditionalism are dead principles carried on by living people. And the mistake that we've made so much in the church is we have made what were supposed to be movements, monuments. And then we turned around and made what were monuments, we turned them into movements. Some of these dynamics in our churches, when you get down to what I call cultural canonization, it is our way of canonizing the Bible to fit our comfort zone. Most of what you find when you look at doctrine is rarely, if ever, biblical. It's generally only cultural. As this thing continues to develop, we've made what was supposed to be a movement in the Bible heading in a direction, and we erected statues to stay where we were supposed to keep moving.
Wow.
And what has happened in the church, we find ourselves in a place that I was dealing and having a conversation earlier with a preaching friend of mine. One of my favorite animated shows is the Flintstones. And one of the most monumental episodes was a kind of like a little small movie where the Flintstones meet the Jetsons. And what happened is Fred and his family were forced by default to catch up to George and his family. The problem was George Jetson was operating with sprockets. He was operating, his parking lot was a landing pad. He was living in a property that the entire property was a penthouse because it was suspended in midair. Fred ran into a transition because he was still stuck in the rock quarry with his boss. He's still using a car that has no engine. It has his feet. And in his world, he was technologically advanced for his circumstance. He had a dishwasher that was a seagull. He had items that you would think were progressive for bedrock. But when he sees the Jetson space, he's taken aback. The problem would be, what would happen if George went to bedrock? He would adjust because he's been so far ahead that he can make adjustments to move back. The challenge is Fred had to go back to his norm. And when he shows back up, the question that is suspended is, how does he operate in the past when he's seen the future? And this is the challenge that the church will have to run into. That when we were caught up to see what it looked like, everybody outside of the church has been in the Jetsons age. And we were as progressive as we could be in Bedrock Baptist. We missed the fact that God has put us in a space called kingdoms. The kingdoms are apropos to the reality that there are places throughout the world that God has given us dominion over. But because we've looked at the Bible as only a spiritual document and never realized that it was more business plan than it is spiritual document, we have minimized the fact that the church is a kingdom, that government is a kingdom, that finance is a kingdom, that family is a kingdom, that media is a kingdom, that entertainment is a kingdom. But when you slice this pie up into 7 slices, if the only slice of the pie you're going to eat is the church and throw the other 6 slices away, this puts us in the place where we understand that the kingdoms that we've been called to are now being defeated by hell simply because we decided to throw them away and never take authority. So a lot of the reality is we've been trying to get folks to come to church when we should have been taking church to them. Little Wayne can't come to your sanctuary. LeBron can't come to your sanctuary. Jeff Bezos can't come to your sanctuary, but there are enough of us who are operating in a space that is predominantly more involved than just church. That's 1 day out of 7. At least 6 days a week, we're in the marketplace. So could it be that we are now in a circumstance where we're having to reconfigure church because we've never taken church to 6 and we've asked people to come to 1? And we're finding ourselves now wanting to go back to bedrock when he showed us that there is a far greater space that he operates in. And the Jetsons have confused many of us who are still running with cars that have no engines. And it's forcing us to catch up, look at it differently, and be impacted by our own comfort level. And we're sitting there in tradition, operating like we're dead when he's given us life.
Wow.
And Pastor Ross, I definitely holistically agree with that whole analogy and theory of what is. A lot of churches who were stuck in the Flintstone era, they were afraid to go into the Jetson era. Watch this, because they were afraid of who wouldn't show up. So they were so afraid, right? They were stuck in this and that. They were so afraid on reaching who would come versus reaching who hadn't been touched yet. And that's where the church has the problem, is that we're so busy trying to reach who we see every week versus reaching who hadn't been touched yet. And that's Pastor, the problem.
Pastor, you hit it right on the head, and that's a big reality, because the church is the only place that only markets to people who already have bought the product. This is the whole concept of, we really don't embrace the Bible that we say we read. I realized that Christians are the most illiterate religious group on the planet because they've never read the document that they say they believe in.
Right.
And within that dynamic, when you start to read it, many of the people that we preach about in the Bible are not preachers. They are marketplace masters.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham is an organizational developer.
Mm-hmm.
David is a 5-star military general. Moses is a civil rights leader.
Mm-hmm.
Peter, James, and John are fishermen and entrepreneurs by trade. Jesus himself is a carpenter. And Peter, or Paul rather, is so efficient at his tent business that when they can't pay him, he says, my business is bumping so much that it really doesn't matter. And what made them effective is that he called people into kingdoms where the church has to show up. And this is the challenge, simply because we never showed up where he called us. We just stayed where he told us to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And this problem is we're not trying to attract people who are already here. What our goal should be is to attract people who can't come here, but because we went to them, they will now see him.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest challenge that we faced in fear is that many of the times we were trying to get them to see us and not see him.
Wow.
So when that happens, it makes us fearful to go out because we're going out in the wrong name.
Can I just say one more thing to that, Dr. Hendrix?
Yeah, go ahead.
Pastor Ross, yeah, you threw the alley. I just want to dunk it right there, because when you said the fact that where we are and we got stuck because we weren't trying to allow people to see him, that's why we as the church, we're so hypocritical when churches decide to be innovative and step out of the box.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that when the fact that if I have a DJ to open up service to play Frankie and Beverly for the generation that is there, and they play it, now I'm the world's worst pastor because I'm out there with the word.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to reach who's sitting there. I'm trying to reach those who don't think that God is, you're not trying to paint God as being this, we're not trying to paint God as being somebody where you can do anything, live any kind of life, but God is fun. God operated in methods.
Yes.
He didn't when he decided to do something, he always did it, but he did it in different ways. So if he operated in different methods, then why are we staying stuck in the same method? And then why are we hypocritical of certain methods? Now and it's all based on what people think, what they believe. But we as the church have to get through this thing of being so judgmental and so hypocritical of churches trying to reach those who are not sitting right there in the sanctuary.
Wow.
I totally agree.
Yeah. And could it be that this was a purposeful collision that had to take place? It is almost as if the marketplace and the church had to collide for us to see. In order for this thing to work, there has to be a knitting together of the marketplace and the kingdom. And I think we've separated them for so long that we don't understand the marketplace was already in the word of God, but we look at the kingdom as a separate entity. So if we will look at it all as one thing instead of two separate pieces of the kingdom, then I think we can be effective. So how can we take what we've separated for so long and bring it back together in a whole piece that we can say, hey, it is okay to be an entrepreneur. It is okay to be business minded. It is okay to have many streams of income and still be effective in the kingdom without destroying what God has given me. And I think what has happened is because of the tradition and because of the thinking, the mindset, especially I want to address the African-American church, we have been so stuck. As he said, if I come in, one of the most powerful sermons I've ever been to, I went to a women's conference in Chicago, and they broke out with Bag Lady by Erika Badu. They had suitcases on the stage. And when I tell you, you could see the women cringe because they broke out with Erika Badu on the stage with their music. But the message was so relevant. By the time those same women that were cringing, they were at the altar because they understood that the baggage they were carrying, it wasn't really about the song. It was the message that they were trying to get across. Could it be that we've been so opposed to the world's way of custom of bringing it together? Because if we're really honest with ourselves, we live in a world that we every day are touched world things. We're affected by what goes around us. Could it be that if we can bring it together and make it work, that we could see our churches be farther, instead of taking us 16 years to get there, we get there together in 3 to 4 years. We're already behind because this is 2020. We should be already in 2025, but now 2020 has thrown us off because we didn't see this coming, but we thought about it. But I believe some of us now have to rethink what our vision is going to look like going forward.
Go ahead, Pastor. I'm sorry.
No. I just want to go before you make me look bad again. Now, what I was going to say is, Dr. Hendrix, I think that a lot of churches, if you go back to what Pastor Ross said earlier in the conversation, I think that a lot of churches need to understand that this pandemic is pushing churches to the pressure point of operating in purpose again. And I'm paraphrasing, meaning because 2020, I still tell my church, like 2020, this is our year of reward. We started off and we're saying it. And so I've seen people, Pastor Ross, on Facebook say, throw the whole year away, throw the rest of the year away. No, I still got 6 months left in the year.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for God to still do what he promised me he would do, regardless of what has happened. So I'm not throwing anything away. I'm hanging on to what he promised. And we have to remember that this pandemic, it may have crushed us as a church. It may have crushed some churches, but some churches is going to propel.
Yeah.
Because I started to change my language, because Pastor Ross, to be truth and transparent, when this pandemic first hit, I thought that we weren't going to make it, meaning not because of anything, nothing didn't happen. I just let what was outside infuse my faith to start speaking what I was reading. But how can we as leaders and people of faith who people depend on not fall into that trap and lead people to where they need to be in faith during this time if we don't have the faith ourselves? So when I started speaking life and started changing the language that I spoke, then I started to see things different, that I believe that we as a church will not come out worse, but we're going to come out better, financially stronger. We're going to come out with more anointing. We're going to come out with more power, because this pandemic didn't crush us. It propelled us.
Yes.
I so agree. I shared with somebody a couple of weeks ago that this encounter made me realize exactly how Noah felt. Simply because for the last 8 years, from a marketplace standpoint, trying to impact people in ministry, we have been shouting, children, it's getting ready to rain. We were going to people's churches, we were going to people's organizations, telling them to get their brand, their purpose, their social media, transition onto the platform. And I would not be able to properly tell you how many pastors only wanted a book to show that they were credible and a website to show that they were up to date. And as we move to this process, what you find out about Noah is the reason that for 120 years he sounded crazy is because they had never seen precipitation before.
Wow.
So he's telling them that something is going to happen that they can't see. And he's asking them as a futurist to operate in faith before it's too late. When you jump over and hopscotch to the New Testament, you have a couple of opportunities where you read in Romans where it says, I think it is chapter 12, verse 2, be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. This word transform in the Greek is metamothio. It is talking about a metamorphosis of how you think within your mindset. You cannot allow the spiritual asbestos and the treacherous termites to eat away at your thinking, because if you don't metamorphosize your thinking and prepare for what's happening, you'll find yourself conformed. We use that passage in such a twisted way simply because we don't see the Bible any more than a spiritual document, and I'll keep hanging my hat on that. We have to admit, we have to understand that God himself is an entrepreneur.
Yes.
How do you embrace that? Because when Jesus is lost by his earthly mother and father, and he's at 12 having a dialogue with thinkers and futurists and innovators, his mother asked him in no uncertain terms, "Why didn't you find us?" And he says, "I must be about my father's business." His father was such a business-minded individual that he literally puts a plan in place, that he banks on the marketing strategy, that my love is so infinite that if you buy into it, you don't have any issues. The challenge is we purchase the portion of the Bible that we're comfortable with, and we throw the rest of it away. It's talking about being shrewd like the world. I want church people to be shrewd like the people of the world, because they know how to fend for themselves. They know how to reach their target. We are now in this space where we literally have to throw away our comforts. We literally have to throw away our fears, because of the fact that there is a whole generation of people who are waiting to hear from God. The challenge is we only want them to hear from the God that sits in the four walls of our sanctuary. And within that, the leadership has a major challenge, because by default, the template and prerequisite for Jesus and his disciples to ultimately become apostles is that they first had to be marketplace masters before they became preachers. That's a problem, because he chose 12 people who didn't go to church. He chose 12 people who understood the marketplace, and he strategically cultivated them so that when they became preachers, they could go back to the areas that they were impactful and bring people in. The biggest challenge has to be that when we as leaders are not comfortable with where we're headed, we surround ourselves with people who already know how to go there. And this is a shameless plug. I have to shout out my pastor, Dr. Jamal Harrison Bryant, because he's one of the few people I've ever met that is so comfortable with himself that he puts people around him that can go the places that he's not. And that is a challenge that all of us as leaders have to understand. You will not reach places if you keep people away from you simply because you're uncomfortable with what you don't know. And in this space is forcing us to all be on the same page. The mega church and the small church are all on the same playing field. The small business and the major corporation all on the same playing field. So now that we have level playing field, we need to be, some of the stuff that the small church is saying, the mega church can learn from. Some of the stuff that the small business can tell the major corporation. Look, Top Golf can listen to a small business right now. Neiman Marcus can listen to a small business. We've got to make sure that we take it beyond our comfort.
You know, one of the things that struck me that you said, I've been in a series this month of May called Table Talk. And I'm coming from John, I'm from Luke, the 14th chapter. And it talked about how they came to the table, who they invited to the table. And who we are used to coming to the table with, that we're comfortable with, we're going to have to dismantle that. Could it be that now at my table, I'm going to have a doctor, a lawyer, a banker, a scientist. I'm going to have different people at my table than just my deacons. Because now, in order to move my church forward, my deacon has been on deacon board for 40 years. God bless his soul. He's a good deacon, but he can't help me move where I'm trying to move in this next level. So now, when you come to the table, we've got to be intentionally in who we invite to the table. And so we got to strategically plan that and say, now, how do I shape that? And then we cannot be afraid to share our table with somebody else. A mega church and a small church, we need to be able to share our same table, because we all got to eat. But what you eat and what I eat is the same thing. It just may be at different settings in different states and different towns, but there's a table for everybody to sit at.
That's so important, Doc, because when I think about innovation, Steve Jobs starts this concept called Macintosh.
Mhm.
And he is so far ahead in his vision, but such a horrible leader of people that he creates something that is for a unique niche. But the team has to get rid of him because he can't lead them while casting vision.
Wow.
This next time frame, Steve spends time getting to learn himself. He creates Pixar.
Yeah.
Many of us don't realize that Pixar is the only animated company that has sold more than Disney ever has.
Wow.
In this process, he also creates Next. When he creates Next, he brings people to the table that are not just tech people. At the same time, Apple has been now trying to recreate the innovation that they lost from Steve by putting leaders at the table.
Mhm.
So they start bringing Pepsi's old CEO. They start bringing people who are the right people where Apple is.
Mhm.
And when he cultivates his platform, Apple realizes that it's time to go back to Steve, and Steve realizes that it's time to go back to Apple. But this is what caught them. He made them buy out a system that he created at Next that would change Apple. It's called the iOS system. And if you have an iPhone 6, an iPhone 11, whatever you have, his innovation was so cutting edge because of who he had at the table that they have not found anything better to replace it with.
Mhm.
And this challenge is where we are as a church, because we are bringing people to the table that cannot cast vision for tomorrow that will be so priceless that we won't find anything better. I shared on an earlier webinar that we moved from the typewriter to the word processor. We moved from the word processor to the desktop. We moved from the desktop to the laptop. We moved from the laptop to the smartphone. And now we have iPads. What struck me was the keyboard never changed because the words have to still stay the same. The performance has to be increased. And you've now got people at your table in most contexts who were good at a filing system. They could use whiteout like nobody's business. They knew how to type 250 words per second, but they don't know what the cloud is. They think that the cloud is the second coming of Christ. And because you have people at your table who don't speak the language of the present age, you find yourself where William N. spoke, that if you become married to the present age, you will become the widow of the coming generation. And if we don't put the right people at the table, if you don't have some CEOs at your table, if you don't have some doctors at your table, my wife is an epidemiologist for the CDC. So before we talk about coming back into the church, I have to consider when I'm talking to our congregation and talking to our leadership that if you have wooden pews or if you have cushion chairs, that COVID sits on cushion and fabrics different than it sits on wood.
Wow.
But if you don't have the right people at the table, you will move spiritually and then hurt people physically because you only have one mindset. If that's all you have, you are missing the fact that your transition is not that you can't move technologically, but liability wise, you could be the hold up to the transition. And if we keep making ourselves the hold up by not diversifying, we minimize our impact and we ultimately become extinct.
Wow. Wow. Go ahead, Pastor Clark. I see Edge. Go ahead.
No, I agree with Pastor Ross because one thing that he said about Dr. Bryant, phenomenal leader of our time, a new generational leader and pastor. One thing that I love about Dr. Bryant is that his ability to surround people with the Pastor Ross, with the Pastor Khalees Lemons, with people who would be willing to tell him, give them their opinion based on their expertise to make them better. And we have a lot of leaders who are so controlling and so stuck on what they think that all they want around them is yes people.
Wow.
And a yes people church becomes a weak church. And a weak church cannot propel and move to where we need to go. And so I tell people all the time, I tell my leaders and my team all the time, listen, you don't have to say yes to me. You can tell me and disagree with me in a respectful way, in a spiritual way, and respectfully disagree. And leaders have to be okay. Those leaders who are watching, you have to be okay with your team and your leaders disagreeing with you on certain issues in order for you to grow. Healthy disagreement creates proper growth. And if we don't understand that and grasp that concept, that's why churches stay stagnant. That's why churches stay stuck. That's why leaders don't move anywhere, because we stay stuck in the personality of the leader and not in the personality of who God is.
Wow.
God never stayed stuck. So why should the church stay stuck? Because we're so busy focusing on the man and not the man.
All right. Yep. And you know, one of the things is, what do you do though with an older congregation that has older people there that are not technologically savvy, that are used to filling out their tithing envelope and putting in the collection plate, or marching around and putting it in they're so accustomed to that. Now, how do we transition them, not out the door, but yet transition them to a place that we're trying to move somewhere? What you have is valuable, and we love the wisdom, but where we're going, we need different people at the table. How do we do that and not offend those that have been there prior to us? I often tell people this, you know, as I like to talk to millennials. I'm older than a millennial, but I like to talk to them because their insight into things is, I would never think that. My niece said something to me the other day, and I said, how'd you even formulate that thought? I mean, like, I would have never thought to that. But she's 21, but I would have never formulated that thought the way she did. But it made me think about how I was doing a particular task. And she said, Auntie Erika, if you just move this and do this, it'll work. And I tried it, and boom, it worked just like she told me. So how do we move those that are there, not offending them, but say, hey, we got to move. But how do we do that? Because that's going to be a struggle moving forward.
So this is not as complicated as we make it. Let me kind of backtrack. We've got to change our dialogue because we have some kind of way made millennials the demonic force to church.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. Many of us have no idea who millennials are.
That's true.
Millennials are between the age of 32 to 40. So let's put this in context.
I still made it.
Yeah, these individuals are mixing into two generations. They are part of Generation X, and they are the coming generation behind Generation X. The truth be told, these people are entrepreneurs. They have kids graduating high school this year. These individuals are not teeny boppers. These people are well established. There are 6 generations as of right now behind them that we never talked to.
Wow.
On top of that, we have marginalized them with our tones simply because the voices that we respect, and all respect to these sages, have demonized generations who are younger, not forgetting that they were just the generation that was demonized by the generation in front of them. Realize that Thomas Dorsey was kicked out of church because they said Precious Lord was too secular. Let's embrace that reality. On top of this, this is the generation that is talking about the millennials who had the Clark sisters and Maddie Moss Clark almost kicked out of the Church of God in Christ for reaching the masses. Yeah. So what has to happen in this moment is we have to give credit to the fact that generations, as they get younger and generations get older, need each other. So ask yourself the question, do you have any members in your church that have a rotary phone? Do you have any members in your church that don't have a smartphone? Do you have any members in your church that don't have a Facebook page? In the event that they don't, this is a great opportunity to reach out to the young people who are in your church that know Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and work at the Apple store, to be able to talk and parallel, because the older generation has something that the younger generation can learn from, and the younger generation has something the older generation can learn from. We are better together. So why is this important? If we are too traditional, we miss the contemporary opportunity. If we're too contemporary, we miss the traditional opportunity. It has to be a synergy where we now bring people into the place where we stop making a crutch for them when they don't even have a limp. So we have to put them in the place to say, you know what? Let's go and have a Learn Your Smartphone Sunday. Let's have Bible study on Tuesday, where we're going to bring all the young folks. We're going to call the Apple store. We're going to call AT&T, and we're just going to show up, and we're going to teach you how to use your phone. So what does this do? I can't ask you to give online if I don't teach you how to use your phone.
That's right.
Well, so let's just start with the basics. Instead of saying what doesn't work, let's find the resolution. What did you just do? You just brought young folks to your church. The biggest challenge of a brand is about experiences with and information about a product, a concept, or an idea. So don't tell me that your church is accepting to all and focused on youth, and the average age of your young adult choir is 65.
Wow.
The information that I've had about you and the experience I've had with you shows me that you're false advertising. If you're trying to reach a particular group of people, use the people that you're criticizing to cultivate. And then in that moment, you can bridge gaps, simply because the people that we used to talk about, we got to now start talking to. The people we used to look down on, we got to now start looking at. Why? Because you cannot cultivate and criticize at the same time. It doesn't look the same. Some of the most spiritual people I know smell like weed and got tattoos. Some of the biggest hell raisers I know got on Berkshire stockings, got on hats, and got on long dresses. It's not what you dress like, it's what you believe and where your heart is. And we've got to shift our vantage point so that we can embrace what we've been uncomfortable with, and it bridges the divide. Do we still need to send out envelopes? Yes, that may be an option. Do we still need to have 800 numbers so where you can log in and listen to the stream? Technology gives you that opportunity. Don't kill every option, but don't minimize options simply because you believe that your older people won't get it. I just used the example. My mama, for Mother's Day, we're in quarantine. We are social distancing. I have not seen her face to face since March the 15th. So when I got ready to do something to give her resources, she's been asking me for weeks, almost months, to set her up on Cash App. Well, I don't need her phone to set her up on Cash App. I just pulled out the Cash App. I know her telephone number. I know her email address. When it sent her the code, I said, Mama, give me that code. Now my mama has Cash App. She got a smartphone. She got a laptop. She has a modem. My wife's grandmother has a modem at her house. We spent time this last week, and I can't get her mama or her grandmama at almost 77 years old off of Facebook. They just needed somebody to teach them.
Yeah.
If we don't teach them, they don't know. And we got to take time to teach, as opposed to saying they can't do it.
Pastor Clark.
I think he answered that question. It's nothing for me to say.
But I think Pastor Clark, he has a unique setup. The majority of your church are millennials. A big majority of his church is millennials. I got to tell people this: since we've been at home in a pandemic, there are a couple of churches I get to watch I wouldn't ordinarily watch. I call Pastor Bryant my internet pastor. So after I finish search, I get him later on. I look at Pastor Clark. There's a couple of people I look at after, later on in that day that I glean from. and you look at them, you look at their service, you look at the word, and you look at the engagement. For me, I am a visual person. You can say a lot of things to me, but if what I see you, if what I hear you say, and the perception of people, I don't see the connection or the synergy of the emotion going on. It makes me think there's a disconnect there somewhere. So how can we as African Americans, because we have been, we are notorious for not wanting to change. And I often tell people this: every day you get up, you're changing. Every day you go to bed, you're changing. Every year you have a birthday. You might not have had a limp when you went to bed last night, but tomorrow morning you wake up, your hip might hurt. That's a change.
Mhm.
And so we cannot ignore change as much as we don't want it. Change is the inevitable. So as an African-American culture, we have to embrace it. But how do we embrace it to the point that because we have so much to contend with politically in our news as it relates to all the killings, Black Lives Matter. It's so much social justice that needs to be dealt with inside of the church. How do we do it and still deflate some of the anger that we may bring to the table? Because we know even in that, it's not going to resolve anything. And it's going back to my original comment. Who do we bring to the table? So how do we help reshape the culture of the African American church? That even we need to look back to the civil rights movement. If we look at it, Dr. King, he was developing the poor man's campaign there in Memphis. He was in the midst of a campaign of trying to perpetuate the culture in the midst of his death. And so sometimes things have to die for something to come alive again or to bring birth to that. So as we know, the church prior to COVID, the church has died. And so now we've got to breathe life back into something or try to resuscitate, or do we leave what has died there and reshape another image? That's a question. That's a thought.
So my opinion and observation is that just as we personally, just as our flesh must die daily,
Mhm.
so must our ability not to stay stuck in what needs to change, needs to die daily. And so for us, again, I am a pastor that my church will tell you, my leaders will tell you, we're going to become a part of that change. So I'm going to be at the city council meetings. I'm going to be with the chief of police. I'm going to be with the mayor, because when change needs to happen, the only way that change can happen through the church is the church has to be involved in a part of that change. And churches, African American churches who are not a part of those particular changes, like my goal, one of my visions of my church is to have a person on a county commissioner's board, have a person on city council, have a person on school board. That's a goal of my church, because if I believe that I can have a person at these tables, then we can become a part of the change. So that's my goal, is to rear up these millennials and raise them up to have the fortitude and the mental toughness to be a part of the change. And that's how you do it. And it's not that deep, as Pastor Ross said. It's just about rearing them up and giving them spiritual and practical guidance. Because sometimes churches can be so spiritual that we miss the practical part.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to get to a point that Dr. Hendrix, becoming a part of the change just comes with practicing practical principles. It's just that simple.
Yeah. I realized that the Black Lives Matter movement is the first civil rights movement that did not birth itself out of the church. And it is indicative of the fact that from a biblical standpoint, when you look at Moses, people miss the fact that Moses was called to cultivate innovators, millennials, and creatives. He was so focused on that as his purpose that in his birth, he was born to a traditional church-going group of people. And God, by design, separated him from his traditional background so that he can cultivate him in a more innovative and open perspective. So he sends him to Pharaoh's house. Moses learns government, he learns finance, he learns infrastructure, he learns leadership, he develops education. and he has an understanding of language. So when he now morphs into Moses Luther King, the biggest challenge that he's forced to face is that he's got to make a decision. Is he going to be an Egyptian or is he going to be a Hebrew? Because he's been around Egyptians so long that he doesn't even look Hebrew anymore. And his first challenge was on the inside. He's got to figure out, am I going to kill this one or am I going to kill that one? And when he doesn't deal with it on the inside, he looks outside the window and sees the two issues fighting outside. One of them gets killed, and now he's got to make up his mind. Which part of the Hebrew am I going to deal with? And when he runs into that, the Hebrew says something prophetic. Who made you prince? Nobody has talked about being a prince to this point, not realizing that he's getting ready to hear from people that he has to deliver, that he's got to think drastically different. While he spends his time on the backside of a mountain, the first thing that he does when he becomes a leader is he's got to go back to folks that have been in this post-traumatic slave syndrome mindset and help them understand we are getting ready to move past your pain and move into your purpose. And many of us have spiritualized these 10 series of trials, not realizing that this is not spiritual. This is Moses operating in his marketplace, because he knows that Pharaoh will only change his mind if he affects his gross national product. If I mess with his air quality, if I mess with the water, because Flint or Egypt has water issues, if I mess with his cattle, if I mess with his crops, sooner or later I can shift him to God's direction. The mistake is Moses had a speaking issue, so he gives him people to support him. But the challenge is when he finally gets the people to this place, Moses has acquiesced to the doubt of the people when he was supposed to lead with the mindset of the innovators, the millennials, and the creatives. And when they get ready to go to the promised land, he's got 10 older generation of people and 2 millennials. He should have known that the 10 older people were going to give him a doubting, comfortable report. He knew by leading that these millennials, because they were young, they were about to take over the proper report. He let old mindset keep him from the promise. And what's happened is he shut up the new innovative people. They said, I'm not speaking no more until these old Negroes die. And what happens is Moses nor the other generation make it. But when Joshua gets in there, because he's got a chip on his shoulders, because the other generation never partnered with them, never cultivated them, never cheered for them, they take the promise and hurt innocent people at the same time. And as a result, we've got to learn from the fact that the civil rights movement, we need to hear from our older people, but we've got to now allow them to give us permission to pass on to our platform, learn what they went through, the mistakes, the rights, the wrongs. And now they got to say, I'm too old to do this. I'm an elder now, because the only thing that old people do is get old and die. Elders pass on wisdom. Elders support younger people. And what happens is, if this doesn't occur, we will now move towards our next generation with anger, with frustration. We'll get all that God promised us, but they're going to kill people that are innocent in the process. And the cycle will keep going over and over and over again. And if we care about it, we got to get angry enough to stop being so stubborn that we keep segregating our generations and integrate us so that we can lift God higher. Without that, this technology, this moment, this transition, and this crisis will only put the crisis in our hands to kill people that we were supposed to cultivate.
Wow. So prophetically, we've been inconvenienced spiritually to change the culture of another generation. So this was an intentional inconvenience.
This is it. God doesn't do anything by accident.
That's right.
So within this reality, we've got to see the intentionality of God, that he is putting us in a place where if you're tired of what's going on, instead of keep complaining about it, start working with it. I remember people talking about Facebook is the devil. You need to get your face out of Facebook and put your face in his book. And now everybody wants to know, how can you do that thing called Facebook? We can't demonize every device that God has given to develop us. We've got to move out of that space and embrace the change. I said it earlier this week. The only person that I found that likes change is a wet baby. And what I like about wet babies is they don't have a voice on their own, but they realize that when I'm dry, when I'm clean, and I smell fresh, I'm at my best. But when I'm wet and I got this mess on me, this doesn't feel good. If it stays here too long, it can irritate me. And I cannot move to my optimum level to sit up while I'm on this mess. So if you sleep, if you busy, if you eating, I'm gonna scream until somebody comes to change me, because I cannot stay in this mess. And it's amazing to me that some point between infancy and adulthood, we have gotten comfortable with never changing. We still like sitting in mess. We still like sitting in stuff that will inconvenience us, that will not allow us to sit up. And we've got to get to the point where we are childlike, and then realize that if we change, it puts us in a better situation. We can't stay the same and then ask God to shower down Rhema in a place that he's not raining on anymore.
Wow, that's good. That's good. You know, psychologist Erik Erikson says something in our different stages, trust versus mistrust. And I think we focus so much on the mistrust of relationships as it relates to the kingdom, that those who we can trust, we put them to the side and only use them at our convenience. And so what we've done, we've allowed people, we've picked and choose who comes to our table based on who I can trust. And sometimes it is good to bring a person to the table that you can mistrust, because even in that mistrust, they can say something that can change your mindset, but they don't have to remain at your table. It's just something there in that mistrust that you can learn from. So I won't keep repeating cycles that I did last year that I can change for this year. The problem I see is that we're going through a perpetual cycle and we never change what we do, because if I can do it better next year, then I can get more results. Could it be that, and if you think about it, a lot of people's calendars, any engagements that you have to go preach, they started in February, March, April, May, June, July, August, a lot of them are gone. This is the platform now of where you're going to be able to do a revival, and you're going to be able to speak to the people. This is the platform that's been created for us at this moment, time, and space, that we need to think about the transition. What would it look like months from now? Because we're going to have some people that will never enter back into our churches. It doesn't mean that they won't still pay their tithes and follow you. But there's a fear there. If I go back into the church, this pandemic has been in my face for so long, am I going to get COVID? And then you're going to have people that's going to run to the church and say, I'm ready to go back in, but I still want to practice the social distancing. And then you're going to have some people that's going to come and say, I'm ready to go, but I don't know where to start because I ain't been taught. How do I do it?
So let me say this real quick. You said a couple of things that I want to jump on. First of all, the African American church is the most impatient church.
Yes.
And I'm going to be that dude. I'm going to say it. I'm not scared to say it. We are the most impatient church, because if just like Pastor Ross just said, he has his wife. They have, you have a team. I just told my admin today, we're developing a team, a strategic team, to help me to come up with the plan that we present to the church, on a plan as to how we will proceed and coming back when the time presents itself. So when the time comes, we'll already have a plan that the church will have, so they understand this is our plan, right? I'm saying that to say, in the midst of our plan, we as the African American church, if we don't like the plan, we run to a church that's not for us because we ain't like the plan that God gave the set man.
Mm-hmm.
And so we become impatient because we so ready, but everything that we're ready for don't mean we always have to move to.
Mm.
And then secondly, you said, you know, we talked about the platform, and this is the platform to do this and platform to do this. That is true, Dr. Hendrix, but everybody got to understand this platform ain't for some people who's using it because everybody ain't using it the right way.
That's right. That's right. You're right.
This platform ain't for everybody to have a revival. Can I be honest?
Yeah.
I'm tired of looking at Facebook and seeing a million pastors preaching. I'm sorry. I'm just Pastor Ross. I'm that dude. I'm sorry. I'm just saying. But you know, and ain't saying nothing. I'm not saying I'm saying anything right now. I may not. It's a matter of opinion. I'm not saying I say things that people want to hear. Yeah, but what I'm saying is just make sure that because you have a platform, make sure your platform has purpose.
Yes. Yes.
Because a platform without purpose has no passion.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, you said something that's amazing. It is impactful. Number one, let me start with helping people understand the platforms. The best way to understand these platforms is to see that Facebook is your sanctuary. YouTube is your word network or your broadcast, and Instagram is your commercial or advertisement.
Wow.
So when you look at it this way, you realize that your congregation is no longer local, it's global. But your purpose is specific to some and not all. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Whatever was in this generation and on this platform, you have to speak to them from a purposeful dynamic, which creates the challenge that many of us have reformulated who our favorite preachers are. Because most of our favorite preachers in this current platform and this current age, we're starting to realize that they had mastered the art of charisma and crowd moving and not content.
Wow.
So when you're looking at this is antithetical to the Black preacher, because we have become accustomed to call and response. And we've never been in a position where we literally just talk to you and realize that your quietness does not mean you're asleep, and that your speaking does not mean you're listening. So it forces a lot of people to find out who they authentically are. And it makes this platform uncomfortable because they never knew, and they're finding out in a crisis.
Wow.
Within that dynamic, it is forcing us in this space to embrace the change so that we can get the authentic power that God has for us. This is so important simply because there are people on this platform who would never come into our sanctuary. I'll give you a perfect example. When I took the position at New Birth, 6,700 people. The very first time I got online, the first Sunday in January, we had 37,000 people viewing on Facebook alone. So if New Birth wanted to fit 37,000 people into the sanctuary, they would almost have to have 7 services. Understand that your brick and mortar is minimized by the voice of your community.
Wow.
This platform is maximized by the purpose of your voice. And the challenge here is that we are uncomfortable maximizing our voice because we don't know whose voice we've been using. And now it's forcing us to not sit down and create parallels with the people that we've been called to partner with. This is just my perspective. This may not be the case of somebody else, but I cannot be comfortable reaching people in their pajamas and I'm in a 6-button suit with a shirt and tie on. I cannot sit here and reach people who would never or have never hearkened the sanctuary. and stand in that sanctuary, not realizing I might just need to sit at a highboy. I may just need to have inspiration. I may just need to have impartation. Why? Because our language has changed and we're uncomfortable with it. And when your language changes, it forces you to restructure everything. I'll go back to when I started my business 14 years ago. I started my business to help churches. And when I went into those churches that I grew up around and told the pastors that I could help you undergird your bottom line by identifying the purpose in people, showing them to do their marketing, develop their business plan, to create a clear brand and generate revenue. And because you help them do that, they'll always remember the church. 5 pastors told me that they were not interested in helping their people. They simply wanted me to help them, and maybe it would turn into potential help for their people. What that showed me was quickly that as I started helping churches, when we got to 2015, we had about $39,000 of accounts receivable outstanding. And out of all 7 entities, the $39,000 was outstanding from the church. And Doc, I'll be honest with you, at that point, I changed our plan. I told my entire staff, I only want to do business with atheists, agnostics, and sinners, simply because they pay their bills.
Mhm.
All of the church folks were wanting a hookup.
Yeah.
We have to now shift simply because, as many pastors and leaders, we have no business acumen, and people have done stuff for us simply because we are pastor so-and-so. And when we are forced to be in the system, it makes us uncomfortable because we want to operate outside of it. This platform will force us to realize that the system is only effective if all of us get inside of it, make the adjustments, and look and say, it's not my mama, it's not my daddy, it's me, oh Lord.
Mhm.
And I got to make the adjustments, because if I make the adjustments, the success is long-term. People will give when they see you as credible. People will follow you when they see you have something to say. People will tune in. And the truth be told, when we go back, it will not be like we saw it in the past. You will, if it only works in COVID, it doesn't work. You have to now start developing discipleship online.
Yes.
You have to now move your men's ministry online. You cannot go back after you've done a service 45 minutes for 8 weeks and then go back for 2 hours. Why? Because people's attention span is not the same.
Yes.
What you now have to do is make the adjustment. And once you make that adjustment, growth will happen.
Mhm.
But without that, we will find ourselves not realizing that the first time in church history, possibly ever, we are in a circumstance where faithful members who have never thought about going anywhere else are now social media surfing. And they realize that their church that they've been faithful to had nothing for them outside of the 4 walls.
Mm.
And for now 8 weeks, they've been going to churches that delivered something for them.
Yeah.
When you open back up, your faithful members will be looking at their church differently because you had nothing to offer them if they couldn't come to you. Change has to happen, and it's got to start with us.
Yes, 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 yes. And you said something that leads us almost to our final question about how do we now create a space for servanthood, discipleship, and growth and transitioning? How do we formulate that? And I think that's a conversation that will not start and end tonight. But those are some things that we have to start reshaping, because if you've built an audience socially, you don't want to lose that audience when you go back into brick and mortar. You want to keep the same audience because they're going to follow you, because at the moment when they were most vulnerable, at the moment when they really needed the word, you spoke to them where they were. So now you can't lose this social media platform to go back to your church and now drop them, because it's almost like abandonment. You know, I fed you enough. Now, after I'm done with you, I'm gonna use you up. I'm gonna get what I can need from you, and I'm moving on. No. So now we got to almost create, as Dr. Brian has done. He created you to be the pastor of internet innovation. It's almost as if we're gonna have to create an atmosphere of someone that is just pastor over the social media, and then you got a pastor. So you're going to have to create plans to fit different circumstances in your church so you will not lose this platform. Because as Pastor Clark said, there's some people on here, this platform is not for them. I gotta be honest, when I can tell by the first 5 minutes, if they're not saying nothing, I'm gonna click off of that and go to something else. Because you realize, first of all, they ain't spent no time in the word of God. And now they're trying to use time, and they're more interested in you knowing what their cash app is, and all this other stuff, as opposed at the end of the day, after I finish, I constantly get off and I ask my best friend, was I clear? Do you think I got my point across? Do you think somebody got saved from the message? I'm debriefing because sometimes at transparency, sometimes we feel like we haven't said anything. And then we get the inbox. My phone is blowing up asking me, is it going to be a part 2, 3, or 4? I said, I don't know yet. But I believe that we've started a conversation that I think that's causing people to have to think about, to be very intentional of what that looks like. And I believe, like Pastor Clark has said, we got to start, there has to be a team approach. What is it going to look like? And as I've been doing in this series, who comes to my table now? And what is that going to look like if I'm not strategically planning people to come to my table, and they may not look like me? Let's be clear. They may not have my same skin color. They may not have they may not have degrees. They may have a high school education, but their thought process can be well beyond education that I'm still paying student loans for, that they come to the table and God just imparted into them some wisdom and impartation. So now we've got to look outside of our walls. What is my team going to look like? And how am I going to reach those outside of my walls?
And I'll say this, and this will be my last thing that I'll say tonight for the sake of time. When those leaders who are on here, the leaders who are watching, the leaders who are listening, or those who are part of their leadership, because you asked the question that Pastor Ross so elegantly answered about what do you do when you need to make a change, and how do you remove those people? Mm-hmm. You have to find purpose and meet people where they are. It's really, again, not that hard, because watch this. Even for my ministry, what I thought was the right things, we're going to make changes coming back, and our leaders are going to have to accept that change. Mm-hmm. Because those who might have been in that position, I'm watching now to see how they handle what they do during the pandemic, to see if they need to be qualified. Because watch this, if you can't handle it away from the 4 walls, then you can't handle it in the 4 walls. Right. And so we have to understand, watch this, that just because you know them leaders don't mean they're qualified. So you can't put a pastor over social media who just joined Facebook a year ago. That's right. You can't have an innovation pastor who is still stuck in traditional ways and don't understand the vision of where the set man is trying to go. So all I'm trying to say is, as you pick and choose who's at your table, a lot of times we put people in place just to fill a position, and we make mistakes, and it causes us more work trying to fill a position versus leaving it vacant until we get those who can do it effectively.
Pastor Clark, you're one of my favorite people in the world right now. We are friends forever. What I quickly learned about church is this is the only platform where people get positions with no credibility. And within this dynamic, it is forcing us to look at who's credible on our team and who's quality. So the first thing we got to do is look at the levels. The beauty of this piece, I had people when I first got this position saying, I didn't know why he made you, I didn't understand the internet and innovation, but I what it does. It didn't even make any sense to me how you can hire somebody to do something that you don't understand. One of the beautiful things that Dr. Bryant did was when he stated this was the case, he said, I don't know what it's going to look like. There's no internet and innovation pastor across the country. You've got to write the job description. It's not for me just to preach, because my goal as internet and innovation pastor is to shepherd people in a technological age to not just focus on what we do on the internet, but to innovate what we're doing in the sanctuary. That's important because although I'm a preacher, my undergrad and my MBA is in marketing. I understand these platforms. I have social media pages. I understand how to operate and speak to different individuals and different entities. We've got to now start looking at people from their area of marketplace expertise so that we can maximize our ministry reach. And the reason that this is important is because we have for years put people in place because they got a good heart. A good heart will cause more headache than you'll ever be able to heal.
Yes.
And this moment will now force us to look at the levels. Secondly, it will force us to change our language. We have to realize that we've been speaking a language that only 1% of the world's population understands. Realize that since 2015, Christianity was no longer the #1 religion in the United States of America. So that means that statistically, only 1.3% of the United States connects themselves to Christianity. And many of us are talking to 99% of the world like they are the 1%. I shared a couple of weeks ago, a church that I served in prior to this, getting ready to walk out almost 8 years ago in between two services. We were leaving the first service, getting ready for the second service. And a gentleman who I found out never gone to church before came to the service, and he was coming to the second service, but he caught the end of the first service. He walked in and walked up to me and the pastor and said, "I'm confused, who died?" And we're looking at him, scratching our head. And he said, "What do you mean, who died?" He said, "You all black, y'all been singing these slow songs. You talking about it, you know, it was the blood. You said he died. And I didn't understand. I thought I was coming to church and it looks like a funeral." And it hit us that communion looked normal to us, but to people who had never seen it, it looked crazy. And if we don't learn how to change our language, we have to be comfortable realizing that saying, "I'm offering Christ to you because you are unsaved." Well, what am I unsaved from? Because I got a house bigger than my mama's. I own a business. I'm operating at the highest level of my market. And you telling me I'm lost and you can't pay your bills. You trying to still make your ends meet. You still praying to a God to provide you with the basic necessities. That dynamic makes me wonder, is your God deaf? Is he asleep? We've got to change our language to reach the people that we've targeted. So we got levels, we've got language. We also got to look at liabilities. We've got to realize that some of our ministries are liabilities. So what that means is many of us have 30 ministries and 30 of them don't minister to anybody. So in this moment, you've got to ask yourself, is it a ministry? Is it a department? Is it an entity? Many of us have medical ministries and nobody issues out any prescriptions. Nobody has a medical degree. They may need to be the health and wellness department. And if that's the case, it's a liability to our growth. So now we may need to narrow them down online to just men, women, young adults, and non-believers. And within those four, we can find multiple ways to minister to people on a larger scale. But if we don't now put the right people at the table, asking the right questions, posing the right concerns, and challenging us with our comfort, we will find ourselves doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I'm challenging every pastor to put people in your team that make you feel uncomfortable, that will make you have to question, have I been doing this the wrong way? I've never thought about that. I've never seen it that way. Using those 3 challenging platforms will put us in a place where we will grow, win, and succeed like we've never done it before.
Wow. Gentlemen, I can tell you this. This has been amazing. My phone has blown up. Talking about when's part 2. I don't know. But I thank you for coming on this platform with me tonight to engage in conversation. I believe, as Pastor Clark has said, I pray that pastors and leaders that have listened to us tonight will begin to think and go back to their leadership and say, hey, we're doing something wrong. We need to rethink how we're going to do that. There has to be a transitional plan going back. And if you don't have a transitional plan, I can almost tell you that your church will not withstand the rest of this year. So I am grateful that y'all given us some nuggets, you've given us some principles, you've given us some thoughts, you've given us some concepts to really think about and to shape. I know even whenever we get ready to meet with our leaders, I got thoughts and ideas. I've been taking notes while y'all write, while y'all talking things that I need to go back and reshape and relook at. And so I'm grateful that you all took time out of your schedule to join me tonight to share your thoughts and your ideas. I pray that we'll be able to do this again as time goes on, and maybe even help and formulate what a transitional plan should look like, to give it outline, a skeleton, because maybe there's going to be a lot of people that won't even know where to start. And so I'm prayerful that this is the beginning of many things to come. I thank you all for joining me on tonight and accepting the invitation. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share with you on this platform. I pray that God would continue to enrich your ministries, and that He would prosper you in every area of your life. Thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Good night.